The next service we're going to connect to via API is math.js. Math.js is a library that will expand the calculations that you can perform within your app. And even though there's some existing plugins for this tool, we're going to take a look at how it's set up, because it's again a very simple example of doing a post request, because that is what we'll focus on now, because we've learned simple ways to do a GET request to get data, and now let's see how can we send data and get a response back that we're looking for. In this case, we're going to send an expression, and we'll receive the evaluation or the result of that expression. So they give us they give us a URL they were going to add. Let's go back into the bubble editor, and I'm going to collapse. You'll want to go into plugins, click on the API connector, and I still had the API, the sportsdata.io API expanded, so I collapsed it. Now I'm going to click here and add another API. I'm going to call this API math.js. You can also call it math.js. Let's take a look then at the API call that we want. And in this case, we should figure out what to call it. Let's just call it evaluate. In this case, we know it's going to be a post request, so let's change it to post. And let's use this as an action so that we can use this during a certain step of the workflows. And that way you can also see how we can connect the API actions in Bubble, because we haven't yet seen that. So we have the endpoint that we're going to copy. And when we're looking at the authentication, we can see that there actually isn't any there's any documentation about the particular authentication, and in fact we actually don't need to authenticate with this particular API. We just need to provide it the relevant information. So let's take a look at what JSON is. It's JavaScript oriented notation. I recommend that you do some reading about JSON to better understand it. I'll give a succinct explanation now. It's essentially a simple format for mapping keys to their value pairs. So in this case, we'll always have strings on one side, which are basically the keys. In this case, expression is the key. It's surrounded by these two quotations. And then this semicolon, a semicolon is essentially like the equal sign. And on the right side of this semicolon, we have whatever this particular key is equal to, whatever the value is, which can be a string. If it's a string, then it's also going to be connected with these quotations on either side. Or if we are equating this key to a number, then it's going to be it's not going to have any quotations on either side. It's going to look like we see in here, which is precision. It says it's 14. The next things to keep in mind is that the curly brackets are always going to go on either end of the JSON expression, other end of this whole list of text that we're going to send through. So we'll want to make sure that these two curly brackets, their curly brackets are always matching in the end. And we have these square brackets, which will denote a list. When we're going down the line as well with this particular notation, you'll notice that you have a parentheses, here, parentheses, and then on the last item in any list in JSON, there's no parentheses on that item. So you'll want to remove that in case. And so what we're going to do is actually reformat this. I've simplified our notation, and you should do this as well, because we will just be doing one expression at a time. I think that will be the most useful, because you can always reuse this action later on in your workflows as you're going about this. So instead of taking this example that they have here with this table, we can see that we've got an option to use a string or the string with these two brackets, which lets us know that that's a list, an array of items. In this case, we just want one. So we'll say, okay, well, we know we can use a string. So let's actually just par this down and we get rid of these brackets. And eventually, once we've brought all of that information, we've chiseled all that out, then we just want to have expr the quotations on either side, plus the semicolon. And then in here, we're using these brackets on either side, as you've already seen. So I'm not going to put those in there again, but putting those brackets on either side and then specifying a key, specifying something in here allows us to create this variable. We're going to want to set this to public, so it's just not private. So uncheck private. Unchecking private is going to allow us to use a different expression at different locations within our app. So the final thing that we want to do to connect this is put a value in here for the expression. This value doesn't mean that every time we run this every time we make this call, essentially we want to communicate and send an expression to math.js. Every time we send that expression, it's not going to be what we put in here. This is just to do our initial call, which sets up the connection for us to do all the subsequent ones. So we should add some a valid string in here so that we can have some sample data for the first connection. In this case, I just did 2 times 2, very simple sample data to gather. So it'll go right into this expression, and let's send it out now. So I'm going to click on reinitialize call, and we can see, boom, we get a result. And the result that we get is 4. So if you got a result plus an error, let's save both of those. Save the result as a number, because we know that we're dealing with math, so we're going to be dealing with a result that's a number. So update that field to number. The error message, we can leave that as text. We'll click on save. So now what we have is an option in the workflows. Let's just do when page is loaded. Let's say math.js. So we searched for math. We could search for math.js in here in the workflows, and I just added in a random trigger that will then set off. Let's actually go back. So that will then set off this action. So in here, I clicked here to add an action. I just searched for math.js dash evaluate, and we know in here that's essentially the name of the API that we selected dash the name of the call, that what we decided to call this when we send an expression, which is in our case is evaluate. So now we have this option to send an expression to math.js, get the result back. Let's see how does that play out though in the steps as well, so we know how we can save that information. So let's say that we want to save it. So I'm going to add a new type in here. So let's go into the data, and we'll go into this, and we'll say result. We'll just call this result. Click here to create that, and let's also add a number to the result. Click on field type number in the field. I spelled that wrong, that's all right. Let's now create a result as the second step in here. So I went click here to add an action, create a new thing, create a result. So back here we've evaluated the expression. In this case, let's do 12 plus 24 times 90. Something a little bit more advanced, but still really basic. We want to store that result. Let's say result. And actually, let's do something more practical. Let's say convert Celsius to Fahrenheit formula. And let's put that into math.js. Okay, so it's 0 times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. Okay. I'm also going to bolden these. All right, sweet. Celsius to Fahrenheit. And then we'll add a button that says, basically, I'm going to make it look a little bit prettier just because I really don't like these colors. That's better. Okay, and we're going to call this convert. Convert. Just like that, really simple. Convert C to F. Let's now make the conversion between Celsius and Fahrenheit in our app using the API that we set up. We'll go to start edit workflow. When we click on convert, we're going to use the math.js evaluate. So you can find that by searching for math.js evaluate. In this case, we will say input Celsius's value times, and here we can just use this. We can actually, we don't need to, yeah, we'll split this in and say times 9 divided by 5. And let's use the order of operations. I don't know what just happened to that. He just lost it. That's okay. We'll redo it. Here we'll put in the input Celsius's value times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. And there we go. That's what we want. Now let's save the result. We will then say, don't make changes to a thing. Let's create a result. The result will be a number, which would be result of step 1's result. Element itself on the page, we'll just use a custom state. That's fine. So add a custom state on the page, and we'll call this result. Which will be type result. Now let's set the state on this third action to be so we say Shopify's result is going to be result, and we could just say result of step 2's number. Result of step 2, actually. Just directly result of step 2, okay, because we made that as a type result. And now we'll say this is going to be page names results number. So we get that right into here. So let's run a test now. Let's see what we get when we're going to test this out. We'll say 10 degrees Celsius is what in Fahrenheit? Boom, 50 degrees. And let's take it. So 10 is 50. Awesome. Let's try 56. Let's see, what do we get when we do 56? Boom, we get 132.8 and 132.8. So we can see that it's producing accurate results in our conversion, which is really awesome. You've now learned how to set up post commands via API, send information to a service provider, and get that back as a result, as well as add that and save that information into Bubble. So I hope that this was really helpful. You've learned a lot, and you can now take this away, these principles, and level up your creative potential and opportunities to build more awesome things in Bubble.